Now what we're seeing is a complete hijacking of certain sections of our government against a political adversary for very purely political purposes. And I don't think we can let that go unaddressed. We have to call it what it is. It's lawfare, plain and simple, and we got to call it out. The people of Montana elected Trump with over 20 points majority. They want Trump in office. They want Trump policies in place. And it's important to remind them of the fact that my opponent, John Tester, is part of the Biden Democrat machine executing this lawfare. Why are we the number one recipient of dark money attacks of any candidate in the nation? That doesn't feel right to us. And if you're such a pro-veteran candidate, John Tester, why are we seeing, so many challenges to our VA system? Why are we seeing you and your policies prioritize criminal legal aliens over our veterans? After 18 years, Montana's wise to the act.
All right, I hope you had a great weekend. The Trump campaign certainly did. They raised over $70 million. $70 million. And it's funny, the media keeps saying, like, they raised a lot of money. They don't want to say $70 million. They don't want to say it. They don't want to admit it, that this is helping him. They're like, oh, there's some polls that show. You know what? I don't know about the polls, but I do know that every person that I've talked to that was on the fence is now squarely on the Trump team because they're like, this is insane. And donations like this just don't come out of the woodwork. So I'm just telling you, these guys, I'm going to get into the media discussion and I'm going to get into where we stand because you guys have to understand something. I think that we're feeling high right now because the Democrats went too far, but make no mistake about it. I've said this all along. They're going to keep coming. They impeached him twice. They tried to kick him off the ballot. They went after him 4 different ways. The Supreme Court decision is coming down the pike on whether or not he has immunity. But trust me, they're not done. We have a lot of work to do, and these elections are way too close. So our work is just beginning. And the people that are fired up are Trump supporters. Like, yes, people may be coming in our direction, but they're not fired up in the same way. So if you're sitting back right now, understand that this is go time. Steve Bannon said it the other day, protesting, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is when we need to go out and double down on the work in the states, the knocking on the doors, the putting up signs, the IDing folks. This is going to be, they're not kidding around. They didn't go through all of this for nothing. You think they're going to sit back now? No. All right, I got a lot to get into in terms of the verdict fallout, what it means, because there's a lot that's happened since we talked on Friday. I want to just mention last night I had a chance to go by the Birchmere here in Alexandria, Virginia. WMAL had its free speech forum. Our good friend and friend of the show, Larry O'Connor, was part of the team there. I went by, I got to hang out before and then during the show with him and Mark Levin, Chris Plant, Patrice Onwuka, and Julie Gunlock from the show. It was great. It was fun and a lot of really exciting. And what got me excited is that here in Alexandria, not a ton of Republicans, but it was a sold out crowd. It was kind of cool to see it all and the excitement in the room. So anyway, I want to get to the Trump vote, the media losing their minds. I'm going to show you some examples of this. By the way, speaking of court, guess who's in court this week? Hunter. Now, this is just the gun charge. And it was funny how the media is now doing circles about how this is ridiculous and how, he's a victim. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that in just a minute as well, because it's unbelievable how they're treating this very differently. And remember, he admits in his book that he was doing drugs. He talks about this. And yet he filled out a federal firearms application saying that he wasn't addicted to drugs. So this is, and this would have all gone away had he taken the sweetheart deal that his dad's Justice Department offered him, but he didn't. We're going to break that down. Anthony Fauci's on the Hill today. Talk about timing. The New York Post out with a bombshell report that shows that they took his organization $710 million in royalties from drug companies. Gosh, that might have been a good fact to know. Maybe we should have known that at the same time they're telling us all these things, that they were taking almost $1 billion. $710 million in revenue, in royalties from the drug companies. Gee, that's not a conflict, is it? Plus all these WhatsApp messages and attempts to go around FOIA. All the do-gooders and all the transparency lovers, where are they today? Nowhere. Fauci's on the Hill getting grilled, as it should be. Okay. Tim Sheehy is here. He is the Senate candidate in Montana. He's a former Navy SEAL. He's running against John Tester. Now, John Tester, since 2008, has had close election after close election after close election, nail biters. This is the first time that Tester's actually going to have to run, though, with the party of his nominee, the nominee of his party. And that's important. He's always been able to skirt that. And so I want to talk about this right because this is critical to us getting a majority and preventing them from enacting a lot of bad things. Also, guess what? And I don't mean to start this with a downer. It's Pride Month, folks. So you're going to see flags and the LBGTQ 3251C3PO in your face for the next 30 days. This is the corporate media, government. I mean, I woke up this morning and local governments in the greater DC, Virginia area are like, we're Rosa. Like, why? What is this? I don't understand the number of things we don't celebrate in this country. And yet here we are for one whole month. Veterans get a day. Armed forces get a day. People who died from this country, a day. And we celebrate a lifestyle for a month. And everyone has to get on board. This is like that Seinfeld episode. You must wear the ribbon. You have to roll out. You have to put out a flag. I walked down a street in my neighborhood. Every single neighbor on this one street had a flag out. No American flags, but you're celebrating. Like, what? I don't get this. I'm sorry. I don't really care. I'm a conservative. What you want to do in your house, whatever, I don't really care if it doesn't affect me. But why does everyone need to fly a flag? I don't get it. You won't fly a POW MIA flag. You won't fly an American flag, but you'll fly a lifestyle flag. What is going on? All right. I want to talk about the trials, but before I do that, I want to talk about a really good guy, Leo Grillo. Leo Grillo founded Delta Rescue. And if you've been watching the show, you know that I've rescued 3 dogs. This is an issue that I personally care about because Leo didn't found a shelter. Delta Rescue is a no-kill sanctuary. And if you go on to deltarescue.org, you'll see what I'm talking about. Some great videos that show you the work that they do. And think about it, like dogs, cats, horses, they need care, veterinarian care, nutritional care. And Leo provides it all for them. The thing is, it only happens because of the contributions of people like me and you. $5, $100, $1,000. That's what sustains us. And it's a no-kill sanctuary. It started with 1 dog for Leo, and now it's grown into a lifelong mission. I would love you to go on to Delta Rescue or just take a look at the videos. Just look at those videos. And if you're an animal lover, I hope that you can make a contribution. Whatever is in your budget, do that. But also take a look at that estate planning kit. That's one way that we can ensure that this mission endures for a lifetime. So go to deltarescue.org, take a look at the videos and the work that they do and how these animals have such an amazing life going forward because of the work of Leo Grillo. And then think if you can make a contribution. And then even more so, look at that estate planning kit and see if you can make it part of your mission and make this an enduring legacy for Leo and so many other animal lovers like us. Thanks so much for this. All right. Before I get to Tim Sheehy, this candidate from Montana that's going to take out John Tester and give us a majority, I want to talk about some of the things that are happening. First, on just the strictly political front, Trump jumped on TikTok. He went to this UFC fight the other night, and he got on TikTok, and it went nuts.
The president is now on TikTok. It's my honor.
I mean, talk like well over 1.5 billion folks. That's like 330 for Biden. So, I mean, he's crushing it in like 24 hours. There's an analysis that came out that shows that a lot of the content 2-to-1 favors Trump. I get why they're doing this. You guys know how I feel about TikTok. It's a tool of the Chinese government. I get it. I've had a lot of folks on here who argue that we need to play where the audience is. Younger voters are there. It just, it doesn't make me happy. We should not be rewarding China. I get it. I'm just saying, I want to win. I know why they're doing it. It's just whatever. Anyway, I want to get onto this voter fallout because initially there was a lot of questions. Can he vote? Well, Ron DeSantis came out very clearly and said he can vote in Florida. He wasn't convicted in Florida. Florida law is clear. So we cleared that thing up. And I think that's important to understand. This is DeSantis. He came out on X saying that given the absurd nature of the New York prosecution of Trump, this would be an easy case to qualify for restoration of rights per the Florida Clemency Board, which I chair. That's so fantastic. You guys know he's scheduled to be sentenced on July 11th, 4 days before the Republican National Convention. This is going to be really interesting. He was asked on Fox and Friends about whether or not how he would like his sentence. This is what he had to say.
The judge could decide to say, hey, house arrest or even jail.
It could.
What that could.
I'm okay with it. I saw one of my lawyers the other day on television saying, oh, no, you don't want to do that to the president. I said, you don't beg for anything. I don't know that the public would stand it, I'm not sure the public would stand for it.
All right, this is interesting because I get politically if he gets sentenced to an arrest or even home confinement, people are going to go nuts. I mean, I think that guarantees him for sure. But anyway, I get it. I just wouldn't want to spend a night in jail no matter who I was. Okay, I want to get to Tim Sheehy and then we'll talk on the back end about the appeals because it's CNN and so many of the other legal analysts. This is their people, not Trump's lawyers, that are saying, here's why he's going to get off. And I want you to see this because every time I talk to people in the last 24, 48 hours over the weekend, people would say, like, why are you so this? And I go, well, listen to what Ellie Honing from CNN said. Listen to what this person, Dan Abrams on ABC said. They're the lawyers from the mainstream media casting doubt. And then the host goes nuts. And Stephanopoulos couldn't handle it when a Trump lawyer went after him. So I want to get to all this with Tim Sheehy. Before I do, because so many of these interviews went sideways. And speaking of going sideways, you don't know when stuff's going to happen. Just this morning, we had a big, it wasn't a big, it was a blip of the power. Luckily, as I've told you before, I'm ready when something like this happens because we don't know when things are going to go sideways. If you have a Patriot Power Generator 2000X in your house, you don't have to worry. And if you go to 4patriots.com/Spicer, you can check one out, get one for yourself. Something's going to happen. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. It's going to. We'll have an electrical problem. You'll have a natural disaster, wind, power outages of all sorts, attacks on the electrical grid. We don't know when. But you can be ready with a Patriot Power Generator 2000X. I have one in my house. I've powered all the stuff up. You can bring it in your house, no gas. It has a solar panel that comes free with it. Free with it. You don't need to run out and get gas. No fumes coming in your house. You can literally put it in your house. No messy cords running in and out. No gas that you have to run to the gas station. Hope that it's open and get it. The Patriot Power Generator 2000X completely runs on solar panel. And it powers everything for hours. Your refrigerator, devices, computers, you name it, phones. You will be the savior because it's portable. You can bring it anywhere. Trust me when I tell you now, go to 4patriots.com/Spicer. Get the Patriot Power Generator now before an emergency comes your way. All right. I want to get to, speaking of a guy that can handle an emergency, Tim Sheehy from Montana, Navy SEAL, business owner. He is going to put the Republicans in the majority if we can get him over the top. He is the first candidate in the country to put an ad out talking about this verdict. And he's putting John Tester, the incumbent senator, on notice because Tester has been supporting Biden. Let's take a look at this ad, and then I want to bring in Tim Sheehy.
I'm Tim Sheehy, and I approve this message.
It's Lawfare, a state-sponsored political persecution led by Joe Biden and the radical left. They want to throw Trump in jail, trying to rob Americans of their choice in the election. And John Tester is standing right by their side. Tester's even advocated for violence against President Trump.
I think you need to go back and punch him in the face.
And Tester voted to impeach President Trump twice. John Tester supported Joe Biden's witch hunt every step of the way.
All right, joining us, the man behind that ad, Tim Sheehy. Tim, you are the first candidate in the cycle, according to at least Politico, to embrace this ad. Tell me why you guys wanted to put this particular ad up.
Well, I mean, what we're seeing here is a distortion of our constitutional republic in its most rawest form. I mean, this has been going on for years now, as we know. Our founding fathers built a fantastically intricate constitutional republic that's meant to have a system of checks and balances, not just between the branches of government, but then within those branches of government to ensure that the voice of the people is what's actually running this country. And now what we're seeing is a complete hijacking of certain sections of our government against a political adversary for very purely political purposes. And I don't think we can let that go unaddressed. We have to call it what it is. It's lawfare. Love Trump or hate him, like what he says, don't like what he says, like his hair, hate his hair. That's irrelevant. The judicial system is supposed to be impartial. and evaluate each case on its merits. And, from the appointment of this judge to the selection of the jury instructions, and what we've seen throughout this case, and of course, all the others associated with it. I mean, let's not forget, the Jean Carroll case, where they literally changed New York state law so that they could specifically charge Trump with that crime. It's lawfare, plain and simple, and we got to call it out. The people of Montana elected Trump with over 20 points majority. They want Trump in office. They want Trump policies in place. And it's important to remind him of the fact that my opponent, John Tester, is part of the Biden Democrat machine executing this lawfare.
When we talk about, I've made it clear to everyone on the show that not having a Republican Senate majority, got to get the words out, is crucial to President Trump getting his nominees through. If nothing else, that gets the nominees through. This race, I mean, if Democrats have any hope of holding on to the Senate, it's this race. It's John Tester winning re-election. As you mentioned, President Trump won big in Montana in 2020. But since 2008, John Tester has been able to hang on by the skin of his teeth every time. Why is this time different?
Well, I mean, there's a whole number of reasons why. But, let's just start with the basics. Common sense. I mean, common sense is what the vast majority of Americans and Montanans want. Common sense is secure borders, safe streets, cheap gas. Cops are good, criminals are bad, boys are boys, girls are girls. These are like basic principles that were not controversial in 2006, 8, 10, 12, not too long ago. And what the Democrat Party's done is obviously move to Dr. Seuss land, or like up is down and down is up and left is right, and just craziness. And in Montana, where our history frankly was pretty purple, and in many cases dark blue, but Union blue, blue dog Democrat blue, where you could have a pro-gun, pro-border, balanced budget Democrat, which those don't really exist anymore. And John Tester came to office during that period of time when Montana was still very Democrat. And the Democrats still had a semblance of common sense in their platform. They don't anymore. And they've moved so far radicalized, from the, anti-Semitic protests on our college campuses to this disastrous open border policy to the ridiculous spending that's driving our country into oblivion. He's been a loyal foot soldier for all those policies time and time again for about 20 years now, as you know. And this time, Montana is very awake to what's been happening. They're very aware to what the Democrats have been doing, and we've got to remind them of that. Again, because they went for Trump by 20 points, you can see that structurally Montanans understand that the direction that Joe Biden is trying to take this country is unacceptable. So, what's different this time is Montana is a redder state, not because the state has changed, it's because the Democrat Party has left the state. So that's the first thing, is a fundamental landscape change. Second thing is Tester is now sharing a ballot with a very, very popular Republican candidate and a very, very unpopular Democrat candidate. He's never had to do that before. He's been part of the Lucky Calendar Club, 06, 12, and 18.
Lucky Calendar Club. I love it.
He's had a few cycles, which frankly, were lucky for him. And a lot of these guys, Sherrod Brown included on this cycle, have been in that same boat. So they've been rowing with the tide every time. They haven't really had to go out and, row against the current, against the tide in bad weather. And that's what Chester's doing. So, he's going to have some inverse ballot pressure, which is going to be very challenging for him to overcome. And then, of course, we've got a different landscape being pushed by the Republican Party this time. We're very united this cycle. As you well know, sometimes we circle the wagons and we shoot inwards at each other. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And this cycle, I think what we're seeing specifically in the Senate races is a pretty united party. It's very rare where Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump, and Club for Growth, and AFP are all singing on the same sheet of music about how we have to retake the Senate, and they identified the states we have to retake it in. And we're working together to make sure we flip those seats. So all those things put together, and finally, the candidates. And in this particular case, there's some very specific things in Montana that make my candidacy specifically challenging for Tester to refute. And the biggest thing there is veterans. Tester really relies on that veteran vote to stay in office. I'll just say it very plainly. He panders to veterans very, very well. He's been on the VA committee for a long time. He's chair of the VA committee, and he's used that position to really burnish his credentials to our veteran community in Montana, which I'll point out, tied with Alaska, we're the highest percentage state for veterans in America. Between 10 and 11% of Montanan residents are veterans. 1.5% of the national average. And of course, veterans turn out to vote more than everyday people because we fought for that right. So the veteran voting bloc in Montana is structurally significant. And John Tester has depended on that through his 15 years on the committee to really pander to them and say, hey, look, I've repainted this VA clinic. Look, I did this. Look, I did that. But he's never once, he's not a veteran, of course. He's never once had to stand on the debate stage with a veteran and stand behind his record of VA performance, which is record high veteran suicides. VA wait times are up. VA resources going to service illegal immigrants while we have homeless veterans dying on the street. So me as a wounded veteran, combat wounded veteran, a VA healthcare enrollee, my wife was a combat veteran of Afghanistan as well. I can hold him accountable for those failures in a way that a non-veteran candidate can. And we've been doing that, and we're going to continue to do that, because how we're treating our veterans right now, especially in contrast to how we're treating millions and millions of illegal immigrants, is shameful.
It's funny though, when you look at Tester, he's got that look like the old army guy. He's got the haircut and such. Does he play himself off as a guy that's familiar? Like, is there any question, I guess, and I'm not trying to imply anything here, but it's interesting when you've been, like, he hasn't had to face this before, someone of your stature with your service and your record in the military. Is he tried to do a sleight of hand about service?
Oh, of course. I mean, they've been, there's been periods of time, it may still be now, I don't keep track too closely, but, where I've been the number one recipient of dark money attacks of any candidate in the nation. Yeah, and a lot of it's been focused on tearing down my military record, going after, my military credentials, accusing them of being, fabricated or, stolen.
Wait. So wait, hold on. Just to be clear, you fought for this country, you got injured for this country, and the left is attacking you in some way?
Unquestionable. From the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Tester campaign, they've been going after that time and time again, saying, oh, well, we only served this many years, didn't serve that long. Oh, he was only wounded this many times, not that many times. Oh, just because he's a veteran doesn't mean he can represent veterans. And yeah, they've made, attacking my military service a centerpiece of their assaults on me. Of course, my business and my family and everything else, like all candidates, fall into that. And listen, we knew this was coming. It's not, I'm a big boy. I used to get shot at for real, not by fake liberal bullets. So it's not a big deal. But, and in many ways, it's backfired on them, because veterans are looking at that saying, hey, man, you say you're our friend, but, you have YouTube videos making fun of the fact that Tim was wounded. You have people out there attacking his veteran credentials. We don't like that. It doesn't feel right to us. And if you're such a pro-veteran candidate, John Tester, why are we seeing so many challenges to our VA system? Why are we seeing you and your policies prioritize criminal legal aliens over our veterans? And why are you attacking this guy? Fine, attack his policies, attack the Republican platform, but why are you going after his military record? So, and then of course, like you said, gets the haircut and walks around like he's a vet. Again, the gig's up. We call him Two-Faced Tester for a reason, because in DC, he's a 95% Biden supporter, 100% Planned Parenthood, F from the NRA, largest recipient of lobbyist cash of all candidates nationwide. Number one, all congressional, gubernatorial, presidential, senatorial. He's the number one recipient of lobbyist cash. That's how he behaves in DC. Then he comes to Montana and says, oh, I'm an independent voice. I'm going to fight against dark money. I'm fighting against lobbyists. And, I'm fighting for you, Montana. And I buck Joe Biden every step of the way. One of his ads even shows him saying, I've been fighting for border security. I've been holding Biden accountable for border security. Yet his voting record completely belies that. So, Two-Faced Tester goes to D.C., functions like a complete, normal, progressive, radical Democrat, comes to Montana, pretends to be a Republican. And, after 18 years, Montana's wise to the act.
So how does a guy like that publicly in Montana navigate the unpopularity of Joe Biden? Does he fake that he doesn't vote with him and that he's not buddies with him? Or how does he navigate him in that political environment?
Like I said, the Tester two-step, he comes home and tries to pretend his voting record doesn't exist. And that's why the character assassination campaign against me has been so visceral, tens of millions of dollars spent on it, because he can't run on the issues. In Montana, John Tester cannot run on his voting record. He can't run on policy. He can't run on the issues, because if Montanans looked at him on the issues, how he's voted, how he's crushed Montana energy, how he's driven Montana housing costs and cost of living through the roof with these inflationary policies from Biden, opened the border wide open and voted to continue to open that border every single time. When they see that, they vote him out of office in a landslide. So he has to create all these dangerous distractions for Montanans with the help, of course, of his friends in the media, which are always there to do his bidding. and define him as an independent, yeah, he calls himself a Democrat, but he's basically a Republican. And that's his style. 5.5 years out of every 6, he's a loyal progressive, voting in lockstep with Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden. And then for the last 6 months, as he's running up to election, all of a sudden he's a Republican and he's fighting for our gun rights and he's fighting to secure the border and he's fighting for, a balanced budget and all that crap. And, it's worked. And you got to remember, it's worked largely because the Democrats pour this will be the most expensive election in American history per vote ever. This election in Montana, $250 to $300 million for a Senate seat, and it's because the Democrats they set the pace there. It's not us. They set the pace in wrapping John Tester in hundreds of millions of dollars of out-of-state dark money and building him this bubble suit to live in, so that they can't penetrate the truth of who he is and how he votes. And frankly, it's worked. If you spend $200 million in advertising in Montana on anything, it's probably going to work. We have 1 million people here, and that amount of money will buy a lot of branding, and they've done it very well in previous years. But this time, again, it's a new landscape. We've got a more unified Republican front, especially in the Senate races. And frankly, it's hard to, they used to say all politics is local. Well, as you know, now in 2024, all politics is national. It's very, very hard for him to separate himself from the national platform of the Democrat Party.
So we've seen some candidates try to create an illusion that they're close to Trump, right? Sherrod Brown did this ad last week in Ohio claiming that he had worked with President Trump on the opioid issue, despite the fact that, of course, he supports open borders that helps create the opioid issue. Does John Tester in any way try to create the impression that he worked with or is close to President
100%.
Trump?
100% does, and luckily we're hitting that hard because we'll play video clips of him saying, hey, someone should take this guy out and punch him in the face.
Punch him in the face.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're reminding Montana voters who have, again, overwhelmingly supported Trump that Tester, and let's not forget, as you well remember, Ronnie Jackson, the VA appointee or nominee, I should say, from Trump's administration, who would have been a fantastic VA secretary. I know Ronnie personally, as I'm sure you do. His son's also a SEAL, served our country in the Navy and then became the White House physician. Would have been a fantastic candidate to help get the VA on track. Tester specifically undermined him with, again, vicious personal attacks and character assassination, which ruined his nomination. Luckily, now he's a congressman again serving us. But he's absolutely trying to position himself. I think one of his ads even talked about all these bills I sponsored that Trump signed. I worked with Trump to secure the border, and I fought back against Biden to make sure he's securing the border. I mean, it couldn't be more laughable what he's doing. And again, I think it's worked in previous years for a lot of reasons. But now, things are coming to a vanishing point where people are looking at this, especially after COVID, especially after these years of record inflation, record high housing and gas price increases. You can't piss down their back and tell them it's raining before they start smelling and saying, you know what, this isn't working anymore. And they're seeing that the policies he supported were never Trump policies. He was never a Trump supporter. He's been loyal Biden foot soldier every single time. So he's absolutely trying to do it, but we're holding him accountable, making sure that he doesn't fool Montanans again.
The NRSC, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, released a list of the top 4 Senate seats that they think are crucial to Republicans taking the majority. It was Maryland, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and you. Are you subsequently getting the support you need, not just from the national apparatus, but from the outside groups?
I think it's just beginning now. Of course, the primary season, our primary is tomorrow. So I'm going to make a plug, timfromT.com. Our primary is tomorrow. Folks get in there, donate, support. But, as you well know, a lot of these outside groups want to see clarity in primaries before they really commit and invest in these races. So I think after tomorrow, we'll see a lot more outside support coming in. But frankly, ahead of this, yes, largely we have. I mean, AFP has rolled out an unprecedented ground game here in Montana. Where they've just literally been knocking doors, getting out there in the field, reminding people of exactly what we just said, that John Tester is not a conservative. He's not a middle of the road. He's not a moderate. He is a full-on progressive. Obviously, the NRSC has taken a very different tack this race. And as Steve Daines reminds people, and I do as well, Steve Daines is the chair of the NRSC now. Every race cycle is different. Every cycle we have to, adjust to the complexities of that map. And in this cycle, it's very clear. We have a number of vulnerable Democrat seats. We're never going to have a Senate map like this again, potentially, in America. Because if we don't win in 24 as Republicans, after this, it's very possible we don't retake the Senate ever. because the Democrats want to do very specific things if they hold the Senate. That is, eliminate the legislative filibuster. So get rid of the 60 vote threshold to pass legislation as soon as they can.
Where do you come down on that?
Unacceptable. I mean, the filibuster has to remain in place, but they're going to try to eliminate it. They've said as much. And as soon as they do, they want to add 2 more states, D.C. and Puerto Rico, and then they want to expand the Supreme Court. This isn't conspiracy theory. They've laid this out very clearly. And if they do that, which would happen in 2025, that will create a permanent Democrat majority, essentially for a generation. So if we don't win this cycle, it's very possible that in the lives of us and potentially our children, we are not going to see a Republican majority in the Senate again.
Listen, I cannot tell you. I'll talk about this after the interview, but what you just said is so important because we've got to start seeing the big picture. Immigration, packing the court, making D.C. a state, all of these things that you're saying right now, we've got to have people to get the big picture. This is not just a one-year war. This is literally the long play of the Democratic Party to establish a permanent majority. And I'm so happy to hear you say that.
Exactly. And we have to play the long game. We have to look at this how it is. We've had some victories. I mean, obviously, the Supreme Court victories during the Trump administration where, a Republican Senate worked with him to secure a Supreme Court majority. Obviously, huge victory for us. But, we've lost in many other of these efforts. The last Senate cycle was another great example of that where, we were running a bunch of individual races themselves. We were playing very tactically and we were worried about tomorrow, not about the next decade. And I think what's happened this cycle is a lot of these conservative organizations, from Club for Growth to AFP, to AOA, to NRSC, they're all saying, listen, we need to get together right now. We need to stop fighting each other and we need to ensure that we achieve a conservative majority in the Senate this cycle. Because if we don't do it now, literally, potentially, we could never have another opportunity again. Because in 2026 and 2028, Republicans are entirely defensive on the national Senate map. That's just a fact. That's math. That's just statistics and math. 2024, we have 3 blue senators in deep red states. And we have a whole bunch of other races in purple states that are eminently winnable. We have to do a full court press nationally on all 10 of these races, specifically, the 4 you mentioned. And we've got to put the best candidates on the field, give them all the firepower they need to flip those seats. And again, what I mentioned there with the filibuster, adding 2 states, which is 4 senators and the Supreme Court. I mean, those are the structural impacts that really, for me, are front of mind. But then the second, third order effects, like you mentioned. I mean, imagine Trump wins the White House and we don't flip the Senate. And he's calling Chuck Schumer trying to find a Secretary of Energy or Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense. We saw the resist movement, what it looked like in 2016 and 2017. Remember that, apoplectic resistance movement coming from the Democrats? I mean, based on the last few years of what's happened, think about how much worse it's going to be in 2025. I mean, we won't be able to get anything done. So empowering our executive branch when we win to get policies passed, get personnel in place that can build another free America is also a huge priority. And then just, regular order of business every day in D.C., which, we haven't seen a whole lot of that in a while. But the simple fact is, if we're not setting the agenda in the Senate, we're at a structural disadvantage there right out the gate.
The last question I want to ask you is, who do you want to align yourself with? Not like, but who do you think, hey, I like what this person is doing as a senator currently, and I'd like to be buddies with them or talk to them about how to operate? And who do you want to support as the next leader?
I like we said in the SEALs, you don't plan what you're going to eat after the mission till you get home from the mission. A lot of superstitions. So, what I'm going to do when I get into the Senate, to be honest, let's win this race. But to be very frank, there's not a particular person or agenda other than, we have to bring common sense back to this country. It's just about common sense now. We can't hand our children a bankrupt nation. We can't keep this border wide open. And I'll work with anybody who's willing to get on board with a common sense America first agenda. We got to put our country first. And, I'll tell you, one of my favorite guys in the Senate right now, it sounds silly, but, old John Fetterman, I probably don't agree with that guy on much, but I love the fact that, whatever he took when he went into his, treatment, he came back wearing basketball shorts, I love the fact that especially he's being incredibly pro-Israel, bucking his party to say very clearly, this is morally wrong. What's being pervaded on our college campuses is disgusting. The rhetoric coming out of my own party. I'm going to stand up for Israel and what's right. And he's doing so every single day, and I respect that. We probably don't agree on much else, but I respect his resolve and his style in doing that.
I can see you in a Carhartt. Maybe the Montana folks will appreciate that, but the sweatshirt and the shorts, I don't think a good SEAL can represent that.
No, I don't think we'll shop at the same wardrobe, but we definitely are aligned in our support for Israel.
All right. One last time, the primary is tomorrow. Where can people go to support your race?
Yeah, thank you. Go to timformt.com. A primary dollar's got to be in by the end of the day tomorrow. We are being outspent right now. I mean, by John Tester and the Democrats pick the day, 3-1, 5-1, 10-1. The Democrat fundraising machine is a juggernaut. It's incredible. Let's be frank. Most of it's driven by these, multi-billionaires, the George Soros, the Bezos, the Zuckerbergs, who are dumping billions of dollars into these races. And, we just can't keep up. We don't need to keep up, but we have to have enough to fight back.
Right.
I can't win the air war against John Tester. We don't have the money. And how we're doing that instead is we're winning the ground war. I'm going to every VFW hall, every rodeo, every small town. We're doing town halls, and I'm listening to Montanans and making sure they understand the significance of this race. But I still got to fill my gas tank, still got to pay my staff, still got to buy yard signs. So please go to timformt.com and consider supporting us.
All right, Tim Sheehy, the hopeful, likely future senator from Montana. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sean.
You bet. All right, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Tim, I don't mean to get into this, but I couldn't help myself what he was saying. I told you what a great point he was making. Look, I wrote about this in my book, Radical Nation, about how Democrats are trying to pack the court. I wrote about how they're trying to make D.C. and Puerto Rico a state. He's absolutely right. You can read about it. If you want to see it in my book, go to SeanSpicer.com and you can get a copy of the book signed. But I'm telling you right now, this is their plan. And I'm so excited that he's in tune with this. This is what they want to do. They want to get rid of the filibuster. They want to pack the court, and they want to create a permanent majority by adding D.C., two senators from D.C. and Puerto Rico. And trust me, once you do that, there's no way that Republicans will ever see the majority again, at least in a century. That would add 4 additional Democrats. We're done. That's what's at stake. Trump's nomination and the future of this country. All right. That's the important part that you have to understand about what's happening in the Senate and why it's so important. As I told you, I want to continue on this lawfare thing for a second and explain what's happening here. The first thing I want to get to is an exchange that happened on CNN's Michael Smerconi's show with Eli Honig. He is CNN's chief legal analyst. I want to play you this clip because this is crucial to understanding the basis of appeals. And it's something that we all say on the right as far as why Trump didn't get a fair trial. But take a listen. This is CNN, folks.
Do you agree with me that this is a legitimate appellate issue for Trump? He can put it in the way that I put it. I don't know for what I was convicted. There are 2 appellate issues here. The first one is what you said. Look, a basic fundamental principle of our criminal law process, of our Constitution, is a defendant is entitled to notice in advance of trial with specificity what he's being charged for, what he's being tried for. That's why we have indictments. Now, the indictment in this case does not specify what the underlying quote-unquote unlawful means are. And in fact, and I found this to be shocking, frankly, the judge did not make the prosecutors commit to any of those unlawful means until we were just about into closing arguments. So that's going to be appeal issue number 1. I was never put on specific notice of what I was being tried for. Appeal argument number 2 is going to be this. One of the bases for conviction here, one of the unlawful means, is a violation of the Federal Election and Campaign Act. Do you know how many times, Michael, we have ever had in the history of this country a state or county level prosecutor charge either as a charge or a subcomponent or an unlawful means or any part of a charge a violation of federal campaign law? The answer was 0. Probably now never. It's 1. So this is the first. Yes, right. Exactly. This is the first time in American history that's been done. And the appeals argument will be when you have a federal regulatory structure around elections, that's for the feds to violate. That's not for state, or in this case, county. Alvin Bragg is a county level prosecutor to enforce, because that would lead to mayhem and that would create problems for federalism, for the notion that federal law has to, no pun intended, trump state and local law.
Ellie, by the way, has a great piece in the in the New York Magazine, and you go to NY Mag. He lays it all out there. He says that the judge donated money in plain violation of a rule prohibiting New York judges from making political contributions to a pro-Biden, anti-Trump political obligation. Did the appellate court say that it was a violation? No. But the appearance of it, yes. They didn't say it was okay. They just said, doesn't look good, but not horrible. That's not good. Alvin Bragg boasted on the campaign trail in an overwhelmingly Democratic county. It's a fact that I've sued Trump over 100 times. This again, remember, this is CNN. I want to show you, though, what happens when a Trump lawyer fights back against a Democrat. That's what George Stephanopoulos is. Take a look at this clip. This is him fighting back on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Will Sharf, one of Trump's campaign attorneys.
And of course, the Attorney General in Manhattan has nothing to do with the Department of Justice. Finally, what do you expect from the sentencing process?
I vehemently disagree that the district attorney in New York was not politically motivated here, and I vehemently disagree that President Biden and his political allies aren't up to their necks in this prosecution. I think the fact
there's
that
no
the Biden
evidence of that, sir. There's no. I'm not going to let you continue to say that. There's just zero evidence of that.
Well, how about the fact that Matthew Colangelo was standing over Alvin Bragg's shoulder when he announced this verdict? I mean, Colangelo was the #3 official in the Biden Department of Justice who suddenly disappears and shows up as an assistant district attorney right as Trump's case in New York starts to proceed.
After
you want to talk about political you want to talk about political coordination?
This has nothing to do. This has nothing to do. No, it's not. This has nothing to do with President Biden. Do you want to answer the question about the sentencing process or not?
I completely disagree that this has nothing to do with President Biden. With respect to sentencing, as I said before, we're going to vigorously challenge this case on appeal. I don't think President Trump is going to end up being subject to any sentence whatsoever. And we look forward to getting this case into the next court and taking this again all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary to vindicate President Trump's rights.
Good for Will Sharf. That was awesome. This idea, there is evidence. He just laid it out for you. Michael Colangelo was the #3 dude at DOJ. You may not agree with it. It may not be compelling, blah, blah, blah. There's evidence. And when the media says this all the time, there's not evidence. There is evidence on a whole front of things, from voting to this. They just don't like it. They may not find it compelling. They're liberals. I get it. But there is evidence. That's their dismissive way of saying, I don't want to listen to this. But I'm glad he fought back. It's interesting, though, because none of them want to talk about in 2002, Hillary Clinton paid for the Steele dossier through a law firm and paid a massive fine to the Federal Election Commission because she filed it as legal expenses. The same Federal Election Commission looked at President Trump's business activities and didn't do anything. That's where it's supposed to be handled. This was all trumped up, no pun intended. This is unbelievable the way this thing has gone down. But of course there's coordination, of course, and their own people are saying it. This case from the jump was ridiculous. It was a misdemeanor bookkeeping charge well past the statute of limitations that they didn't allow the proper due process for. If you're okay with this, then you're okay with the rule of law going bye-bye. We'll see, though. It is interesting. Everybody now is talking about Hunter Biden's case this week, and they're all sitting around talking about, oh, this is going to be so bad for Hunter. There's a couple stories about how he's loved by his dad, and this is just, the backflips they're doing to embrace Hunter Biden and on a gun charge, by the way, lying on a gun form. They all talk about gun violence, except for when it comes to a guy who's on drugs, who's an addict, buying a gun and then having it thrown in a trash can near a school. Well, that's okay. Let's not talk about gun violence anymore, okay? We'll keep an eye on that case all week. We got a lot to break down on that. A lot more from the Trump campaign in terms of where they stand. So much to get to throughout the week. Bill O'Reilly's going to be here. Carrie Lake is going to be here later in the week because of the breaking news. We had to move it. So thanks for starting your week with us. We've got a lot to get to all week long. Continue to subscribe. YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, iThis, iThat. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.